You'll be fair, at least it was work related. you, you sound like that.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I listen to these recordings. I know I.
You got me. I made him do it. All right. Alex, we have 5 minutes today, and I want to talk about SDRs who don't push the buttons that they're supposed to be pushing to get the things that they want, aka conversations, meetings, anecdotal information, et cetera, basically reps who just don't go that extra mile. They don't ask that extra question. They hear an objection. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that you'll see a lot in the space, especially newer reps who might not be used to having, maybe contentious isn't the right word, but conversations that have a little bit of push and pull. It's not something you necessarily run into in just like everyday life growing up, unless you find yourself in a certain situation. So I think I understand where the problem comes from, but it definitely is an area where if you want to be the most successful SDR you can be, you need to be able to sort of push that extra little bit, understanding that it will change the consequences, right? There's a chance that this guy might, you might lose the opportunity here, but there's also a chance if you don't say anything, you could lose the opportunity. So it's understanding that mindset and understanding, not instead of thinking about what could go wrong by pushing that extra little bit, thinking about what could go right,
I like that. Flip it a little bit on its head. And I think mentality wise, there's a big thing with objections and statement where as soon as an SDR hears an objection, to your point, they're thinking like immediately, how am I going to save this call? But that shouldn't be the case. You're not thinking about how am I going to save it just because you've heard an objection. You should be going into it with the mentality of how can I diffuse this objection so that it's not really an issue for either one of us, and how can I then provide value against that objection to basically prove to the prospect that like I'm worth your time. Or we've talked about this in the past, have pseudo imposter syndrome where they go into a conversation, they're like, I'm just a rep, like big deal. If someone wants to take a meeting with me, great. And if they don't, I understand. But you should go into this meeting or into any call thinking, I'm valuable, my solution is worth their time, and I'm basically doing you a favor by reaching out, giving you all the information, and letting you come to some type of conclusion as to whether or not you want to continue talking with me. Mm-hmm. That, when you hear an objection, you have that mentality, it's totally different than if you're sitting there and you're like, man, I hope they say yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to note that it does depend a lot on the objection, right? If you have a full conversation with someone and you explain, we do this, this, and this, and they say, hey, that does sound interesting, but I just don't have the time right now. You pushing them and saying, no, you really need to look at this.
You do have time. What?
They don't. You can't just force them to have time, right? So understanding, some objections shouldn't be overcome in the sense that like they lead to a meeting. They should be overcome in the sense that you listen to them. And what you're pushing for is reconnection down the road. So I think understanding that it's not just if you're making that push, right, that we sort of started this off with, that you're pushing in the direction that the conversation is going to go. You don't have all the power. You can't turn every conversation into a meeting. So when you realize that, knowing what you can turn the conversation into is what you should push it towards, even if that means a disqualification, even if it means they're going to get kicked out of your CRM and you're never going to talk to them again. Being able to push for that and getting clarity about that then becomes what you're trying to accomplish.
And you brought up something earlier that I think is really important for reps to understand is not every objection is something you should or have to hurdle. They're obviously different. If someone talks about timing or budget, it's going to be different than if someone's like, I'm just not interested or I have a competitor. To your point, you have to listen and you have to learn from those situations as well. An objection isn't something you should just focus on overcoming, and it is a learning opportunity as well. If somebody says I'm already using a competitor, don't just go like, oh, wow, who is it? Just be like, oh, no way, like who's the competitor? We run across a bunch, here are some reasons why we think people go with XYZ over us. Is that the case with you? Get them talking, get it to be open-ended, and you start learning a little bit more about their situation to better frame a conversation, take it in a different direction, Or to your point, put those notes in your CRM for later so that somebody else can leverage what you learned.
Yeah, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there with the solution is asking open-ended follow-up questions. I know in my years on the phone as an SDR, that was something where, you know, sometimes the conversation would lull or like we'd sort of reach a stop, and then you have to figure out what to do, right? Maybe they're not quite qualified enough for the conversation. Maybe they throw an objection at you and you're like, oh, all right, let's figure out what to do here. To be able to bring up another question, even like change the topic more or less while still staying on, you know, make the question about a value prop or something about what you do, but changing the topic enough to continue the conversation is a great way to push and to continue building that rapport and having that conversation and learning information from them without feeling like you're being too pushy or like you're really just trying to drive this into a meeting or anything like that.
Good stuff. That was 5 minutes. Feels like it went by real quick.
That's what we do.
What are you going to do?
All right, AJ, 15 seconds. Tell everyone about opt-in.
Opt-in, quick, 5-minute videos, no fluff, actionable tips. You can find us on our YouTube, on our LinkedIn, on our Instagram, and on the website, demanddrive.com. I hit the wrong button. All right, Alex, we've got 5 minutes. And today, I want to talk about my internet. I need to restart. I literally said I want to talk, and then it just stopped.
Oh, I didn't even get to I want to talk. I just heard, Alex, we have 5 minutes. And
All righty.